everybody, so today we are talking about sliders. Now I have a couple sliders. I got one for Christmas and I've used it maybe a handful of times. They don't really, a non-motorized slider isn't really useful, especially when you're a solo shooter like myself. So let's talk about motorized sliders today and what sort of things you do with them. Let's do this. So yeah, I got a motorized slider. It's a GVM slider. It works really great. I can use it with my zcam, I can use it with my DSLRs and so forth, my mirrorless cameras. So it's able to handle the weight. It's not too long. I have a manual slider that is ridiculously long in length. And this one is actually, it's just I think maybe 2.5, 3 feet. It's not, a huge distance to travel, but this one is the GR80QD. Now you can get a longer version of the slider, but I ended up with 80 because I didn't necessarily need something that goes really far distance. Since you're able to set the A and B points, it makes for a good way to do a parallax shot, or just sort of a tracking shot, or pan for that matter. But yeah, it works out pretty well. Now there are a number of things that bother me about this slider so far. One of them is that when you set your A and B points, you have to do it within the controller, and this here is the controller. It's tethered to the slider itself, and it's a clunky thing. It has the battery for the slider, so this powers the slider and the unit, but overall let's see if that can focus. Overall the menu is not the greatest. It's sort of dated a bit. So that's one thing that sort of bothers me about this slider. The other thing is, when you do set your A and B points with the controller, you track all the way over to where you want to set your A point or your B point, and the slider's not smart enough to know not to travel past a certain throw. So it goes and it just keeps going and it starts chewing. And if you don't hit that button, or if the button doesn't acknowledge that you've hit it, it will just slam into the side, probably ruining the track and ruining the engine. So, or the motor, not the engine, but the motor. So that's one thing that's not really favorable. Another thing that I'm not too keen on is that there are no markings for the parallax or the slider, tilt and pan slider bar. So you can't really know, unless you sort of use your fingers or your eyes, know if you're dead center, so that you have a flat tracking. That's sort of annoying. But otherwise, it's built really well. It's carbon fiber for the rails. It's fairly quiet, but you can hear an audible amount of noise. It's minimal, but you do hear the the hum of it running. So if you're doing something with a camera on there and you have your microphone on the camera that you're got on the slider, it probably will pick up a minor amount of audible noise as it works. So, I mean, here are some of the shots that I put together. I was just testing out some things this morning, looking at how to track back and forth, playing with the speeds. The 100% speed can move back and forth fairly quickly, but it's not like overly fast. And you can slow it down all the way to snail's pace. So as you record, it could just slowly move, and if you're doing a parallax shot, your background would adjust, but your focus would retain here. The other thing is, I'm using this with my zcam, so I set the focus. Now I'm not pulling focus for myself as I do this. I probably could, but it would be sort of distracting. So it's important to sort of set your focal points at the start, and if you are doing a parallax, it should be fine. If you're doing just a pan you want to make sure that your person or your subject is in focus and doesn't move too much, or shoot at a higher aperture and just have more or less depth of field. With the EOS RP, I was filming and trying to use the autofocus. Now the autofocus kept like looking and hunting. It wasn't spot on. That might be something that like an R5 or an R6 could easily do, but it didn't quite work as well as I was hoping. So I was watching the focus sort of hunt and find stuff, especially with myself. Like right now I'm not moving too much, but when you start moving the background also, it seems like the RP has a hard time trying to find the focal points. And you know, I have face tracking on, so it should have just locked onto my eyes. It didn't do that very well. Overall, the ability to handle weight is fairly well. My zcam is not the lightest rig in the world. I have my anamorphic lens on it. I have rails. I have a large battery on there, and so it's got a pretty hefty amount of weight, but it doesn't seem to be bothering it too much. Getting going, it has a ramp up speed, so it doesn't just move into a jerking motion. So it sort of ramps up as it gets going, and then it starts moving at its pace that it should be moving. And then if you have it on a loop, that loop will slow down towards the set, you know, destination point, A or B, and then slow down and stop, and then ramp slowly back forward. So I mean, that's great if you're just running as a B cam, and you want to capture, you know, some additional footage as you're doing the work with an A cam, but or capturing the scene with an A cam. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I know a lot of people have talked about sliders that go and just sort of slam into a stop. This one ramps down into a pretty gradual stop. Now this one has been talked about online quite frequently. It is one of the more popular choices, so that's why I picked one up. The package comes with things that enable you to have shutter control. It's got all the shutter trip cables. You can hook those into the control unit here, and so there's a, this would get me out of focus. There we go. So you have the shutter inputs here, and you have your control out to your slided motor there. One thing that I did notice about this is it does have a 1/4-20 on the bottom, and that enables you to probably just, you know, mount it onto a light stand or a tripod next to you, so that, you know, if you are doing something like I'm doing where it's a solo operation, you could easily control the scene and the slider next to you. So I mean, with the zcam, that's great because I could have this controlling the motion of the camera. I could have my cell phone controlling the camera itself, giving me a display. Right now I have the camera hooked up to a HDMI to a monitor, a very small monitor, which at the distance I have it right now, it doesn't work very well. My plan was to move it forward, but I just wanted to make sure I wasn't tripping up the slider with the cable to the camera and to the monitor. So I mean, overall, like, this would be a great little tool for using with the zcam. So as a entry-level budget option for a slider, I really like it, and I'm probably going to go out and film a bit more with it to try and get some shots and some demonstration of what it can do. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button, and if you want to see more content like this and you want to be notified, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Alright, have a good week, everybody.